Could Kevin Durant be on his way to Minnesota? And could Giannis be on his way to Boston? We're going to cover both topics in today's video, as both are talking points from today around the NBA. So make sure you hit that thumbs up and subscribe to the channel here on the Basketball Bulletin, where Trevor Lynn and I keep you guys locked in on the entire NBA. Shout out to Trevor. He is somewhere in an undisclosed location enjoying a vacation. He'll be back in a couple of days, though. But that being said, let's dive in really quick because we've already got it up and at us here on the Minnesota Timberwolves piece of it all. So the Minnesota Timberwolves are reportedly looking to trade for a quote-unquote alpha. That's scathing. What is that? I don't want to read too much into that word choice. That's kind of weird. And are expected to pursue Kevin Durant per Amico Hoops. The Timberwolves need another alpha next to Edwards to win it all, which is why sources told Hoops Wire, that Minnesota is expected to pursue a Durant trade against this offseason. Okay, so he says another, so I'll let it slide. I was going to be like, what you trying to say, man? Okay, well, who said two alphas can't coexist, right? Is Kevin Durant an alpha still? I don't know. But regardless, though, would KD be a good pickup? Absolutely. I do think KD would be a good pickup. Here's the thing. Assuming you don't have to give up too much, I think KD is, for one, I think KD is the type of guy that could fit into mostly any team's infrastructure and not take too much away from it, because he's not the most ball-dominant guy that's going to try to just co-opt your entire offense. You can give KD the ball as a movement player in spots where he can just rise and fire. He will be great as that, as a catch-and-shoot player, things like that. He's just got such a high release point. He's one of the most skilled players ever. I think you can put him in a lot of different systems. And when you have a team like Minnesota that's got a really good defensive core around that, I think you really can, and offensively as well, because Ant's their young superstar. I think that you can really lessen the amount of burden and wear that could be accumulated for Kevin Durant, as he's not the lead guy. He's not the guy that has to do everything, run everything. And he hasn't really necessarily had to be that over the last couple of years. I mean, Booker has been there to help him, for better or worse. Beal has been there to help him, all that stuff. But, I think on Minnesota, I think that would be a really good fit. And I think KD, again, wouldn't be in a position to take anything away from them. They actually tried to make a play for KD during the season whenever all the KD trade stuff was happening at the deadline. You remember that? There was like a list. I don't have it right now, so you'll have to just bear with me. Bad podcasting, I know. But there was like a list of like 5 or so teams that, like, it was like, oh, they called about it. It wasn't anything. And then the next team called about it. It was like, oh, this is kind of something. And they just kept calling. Teams kept calling. Minnesota was, I think, the last team to talk about a Kevin Durant trade post Warriors. And it got pretty interesting with the Warriors because they really made a hardball play to the point where I think that would have went down and they would have got KD instead of Jimmy Butler if KD said he wanted to go there. But KD since said he didn't want to get traded in the middle of the season, etc. I think that burned a bridge with him and Phoenix, and he wants to leave and will probably be gone. I think it's a foregone conclusion he will be. And I think whenever Kevin Durant makes a decision on his future and says, hey, trade me, and these are the teams I want to go to, because he is in a position to command, loosely used command, right? But determine where he wants to go, I'll say, because he's got that last year and he has all the flexibility. He can say, hey, you trade for me, you're not going to keep me. I'm not going to stay here, right? So, yeah, KD can say, oh, trade me to Minnesota. And, oh, if you're trying to, just theoretically anyway, trade back Ant. Oh, no, don't do that, because I want to play with Ant. Obviously, that wouldn't happen, but just theoretically speaking, hypothetically. So I think whatever team gets KD, and for the record, 36, 37-year-old KD isn't going to get you a ton of assets back anyway if you're Phoenix. But I think Phoenix is an interesting spot because they were talking about how they're not just going to sell KD, which is, I think, the right decision to make. I think you need to try to recoup some assets, particularly if you're trading KD. I think the best move of action for them would try to make a deal happen with Houston so they can get their picks back, something like that, so they can control their own destiny and their own future. And then if you're trading KD, I think, you want to at least try to get a first-round pick back. Like, I think you can't, if you're Phoenix, you can't just sell him for players unless you're getting like a young burgeoning player or something like that. You've got to make the most of that trade, right? Because you put a lot in to try to get him. Ultimately, was he drafted or traded? I have to go back. Well, regardless, you've invested a lot in this team with him as part of it. So that's what I'll say to amend that statement. I don't remember if he was drafted or not drafted. Excuse me. He wasn't drafted, of course. Free agent. Did he sign there or was he traded? That's all I'm trying to say. All right, so moving on from this talking point. And, oh, by the way, yeah, I think I think they can absolutely use another scorer that's reliable too. Like another 25 point per game guy alongside Ant would be nasty. Also, isn't KD Ant's idol? There's just a bunch of things to this. I think this is a no-brainer if you're Minnesota. I would like it. I think that would work and it would go through. So Wendy was saying that he believes the Celtics could be in play to make a move for Giannis. We've got that video, which we are going to watch and react to live. All right, here we go.
Part before the horse, we're talking about how nice it would look to put Giannis on the San Antonio Spurs. Is it a realistic possibility?
It's realistic because the Spurs definitely have the assets to both trade for Giannis and have a contending team on the other side of it. But I got to tell you, you have to compute what Giannis may want, and it's not a commentary on Victor or the Spurs. I'm listening to Chris Finch last night from the Timberwolves saying that next year he thinks 13 teams in the Western Conference could be trying to win, and that you could have a great season and go 42-40. And I didn't disagree with them, and I think Giannis will see that too. The move for Giannis, if he has a control, is to go to the East.
Wow.
Greeny, Wendy, I thought about that in my answer. I really thought about that in my answer, but I don't know where he would go in the East that is close. Well,
Boston.
Is that real? Wendy, is that real? Like, I had KD in Boston in my head too. Like, but I don't think that's real.
If you're thinking about, I mean, depending upon the time gap with Jason Tatum, if you're a lot of contracts to move off of, I mean, if you're trying to blow it up and reset.
There are people in this city in New York that would like Giannis also.
That's one.
What are so look, you opened the door. What are the teams we should have an eye on in the Eastern Conference if that is part of his thinking?
Well, again, I think you have to look at the teams that could make a trade for Giannis that the Bucks would accept, and on the other side of the trade would have a contending team. So
see, I don't
Boston
know
would be on that list.
like that.
I agree.
Boston would be on the list. Yeah.
Boston may be the only one, but then,
Boston would be
on the other side of it.
Go
ahead, Wendy.
I think New York would be on that list. You know, there's some difficulties when you talk about aprons and second apron teams trying to make trades, and that's a reality. But there are some teams on the Eastern Conference you could construct an ability to get this done.
Yeah, I'm not going to pretend to be the world's foremost expert on the salary cap and second apron and all that stuff. That's just not what I'm great at. So I couldn't tell you how all that meshes as to whether or not these teams are able to make something happen. They threw a lot of names out there in terms of ultimate destinations for Giannis, whether they apparently started as the Spurs, and then they pivot away from the Spurs and into the East. And that's something Trevor had been talking about himself here on the channel a good bit, that Giannis should try to stay in the East. And that's actually the sales pitch from the Bucks is, hey, look how terrible this conference is. Your path is much clearer, much cleaner, particularly next year with Boston seemingly out of the mix. If you want to contend, the time is now. And I think the entire league is like wide open. That's not to take anything away from like OKC or the other great teams in the NBA, of course, right? That's just, I think that we're in a position now where like there's so much parity on the West where a lot of these teams, like if you get the right matchup, who knows what happens. And then on the East, there's some great teams, but I think that again, there's only a few of those. And so if you get the right matchups or you get a favorable path, you could find yourself towards the end of the playoffs, right? So I think that it's pretty wide open when you look at those two things together. So you know, if you're Giannis, do you want to try to stay in the Eastern Conference? Does he enjoy the Eastern weather more? I think that matters, of course, right? And what team would be able to make a trade for Giannis and then come out on the other side of that? It's a team that's already a contender, right? It needs to be a team that's already a contender or a high-level playoff team. And they threw out the Knicks. They threw out Boston. I think Boston is an interesting one, though, because Giannis makes about $58 million, I believe. I don't know if they're able to swap that with the 54. I'd assume not. And Boston's got a 53 and a 54 million salary on their guys. Would Boston trade Tatum? I don't think so. Not that I don't think that they think Giannis is better or isn't better than Tatum. I just think that he's their guy and they're going to try to build around him. But I don't know if that same loyalty extends to Brown. And I think you could get a pretty clear upgrade. And then you look at it and you're like, okay, well, we could be, 10 months from now looking at Giannis with Tatum. That's a pretty crazy combo, right? Like, I think that would be pretty interesting. Could you imagine a two-man game with those guys? But I don't know. Like, you also have to sell Giannis on, hey, yeah, well, we want to pair you with Tatum, but, he just suffered that injury, so it has to take a little bit of time. The alternative is you trade Tatum and you say, hey, Jaylen Brown's ready right now. does he think that the Boston team with matching salary, probably Tatum going out, works? And then there's the third path with Boston where it's like, okay, well, you keep Tatum and Brown, add Giannis in, trade out some of the other guys, and allow for Milwaukee to just blow it up. I'm sure there's an avenue to get that done, whether you need 3, 4, or 5 teams. I'm sure there's an avenue to get that done. I'd assume that maybe Milwaukee would want that path anyway, just because if you're trading a Giannis, you're probably better just resetting the entire thing. Just a lot kind of in this. And that says, again, we barely talked about the Minnesota side of things. Would Minnesota accept some of those packages? I don't know. Minnesota's still in my head. Milwaukee, my God. Would Milwaukee accept some of those packages? I don't know, right? But aside from that, they kind of also threw out the Knicks in there. Could you imagine the Knicks making another blockbuster trade another summer? That's crazy. I'm sure they could find a way to make something happen, but I think the cleanest swap would be for somebody like Cat. And once again, I think if you're Milwaukee, you're not trying to take back the salaries that New York has. You're trying to just reset things, most likely. And there are a couple of other Eastern teams I think could be really interesting, like the Pacers could be. I like Siakam, but if you could find a way to flip that and maybe some extra salary, of course, to make a match, that would be interesting. But there's a little bit of some bad blood there, but hey, if you're gonna get the opportunity to play with each other, then you can look past that stuff, right? So that's just kind of how things are. What about a Miami? I don't think they're a contender, but with a Giannis, maybe they could sell him on something and maybe make it work. I just think that if you're going towards the East, there's not a lot of different avenues for you to go. I think it's a lot more opportunity for you in the West. A team like Houston, the San Antonio, Houston, potentially Dallas. Like there's these teams that are like right there, just waiting for one more piece. I think that you could say, hey, let me go there and be that piece, right? If OKC had lost, well, I guess it still remains to be seen, but I'm assuming they'll win. But if OKC loses, maybe he says, hey, let me go to OKC. I don't know, right? And then at that point, I think the Bucks would be pretty inclined to talk because OKC's got a lot of stuff you could ask for, right? And, they will be okay with it because they're adding a freaking Giannis to their team, right? So a lot of what I just said also, by the way, to a far lesser extent, because the age gap and all that extends to KD too, right? Like I think KD could be somebody that could plug into a lot of these teams. Like I think KD would be awesome on San Antonio. Like I think KD could plug in a lot of these teams too. But again, to a lesser extent, because Giannis is the far better player today. But ultimately, that is everything. I hope you all enjoyed the video. If you didn't see our most recent upload, make sure you check it out. It's on the screen right now, and we will see you all over there. Have an awesome day.